Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wiener here. I'm coming back to you to finish up our Explorers Age of Encounter. We have really only two more, actually three more Explorers that we're really going to look at. And today we're going to talk about Ferdinand Magellan. Um, so without any further ado, let's get into it. So Magellan we're into the 1500s now, which is the 14th century. Um, as explorers began I said that wrong. I'm sorry. We're into the 1500s now, which is the 16th century. So as explorers began to better understand the shape of the American continent, some including Ferdinand Magellan, contemplating finding a route to Asia by going through the newly discovered continents. So let's take a look at what PBS Videos has to say.
Magellan was born to a noble Portuguese family around 1480. At this time, spices like nutmeg, cloves, and black pepper were the most important commodities in the world. But these spices only grew on tiny islands called the Moluccas in present-day Indonesia. Kings and sultans battled throughout the Indian Ocean for access to these islands, and sailors explored daring and dangerous routes to reach the islands. At the age of 10, Magellan became a page for the Portuguese queen, Leonora, learning astronomy, navigation, and map-making. In 1505, he joined the Portuguese Armada and spent 8 years conquering ports in East Africa and India so that Portugal could gain control of the Indian Ocean and the spice trade. After nearly a decade of constant fighting for eastern access to the Moluccas, Magellan started considering a westward route. He believed that the islands lay only a few days' sail past the New World and hoped that a passage through the continent would prove to be a shorter and safer route to the spices. In 1514, he petitioned King Manuel I of Portugal for the chance to lead a westward expedition to the Moluccas. King Manuel refused, and in 1517, Magellan renounced his Portuguese citizenship and went to Spain to seek support from King Charles I. Realizing that such a voyage would give the Spanish open access to the Moluccas without having to travel across areas controlled by the Portuguese, King Charles granted Magellan the expedition to find a route through the New World.
So there you have it. Good sort of pattern to remember when we're talking about Portugal and Spain, who sailed for who. Most of these guys, some of them, like Columbus, wasn't even Spanish. Da Gama was Portuguese. He sailed for the Portuguese. Here we can see that Magellan was Portuguese as well, but he ended up sailing around the world for Spain. And a good way to remember that is if they go west, they're sailing for Spain. If they go east, they're sailing for Portugal. So we saw here that when he was a young man, he probably sailed right along with Vasco da Gama when da Gama was fighting to secure these ports along Africa here and take control of the Indian Ocean. But he ends up going and sailing for Spain in an effort to get a path for Spain that gets to the Spice Islands here, Indonesia, from the east. He wants to approach it from the east in the Pacific Ocean so that he doesn't have to get in the mix here of all of the fighting between the Portuguese and the Arabs. So what he ends up doing is he sails west along the Atlantic Ocean until he hits the coast of Brazil. He knows he's in South America, and he follows, just like da Gama did years and years ago, around the Cape of Good Hope here in Africa. He's going to sail right through here, down through this cape in South America. All right. In fact, this is called the Strait of Magellan, named after Magellan because he's the guy who first navigated through here. And then when he got up here into the ocean, he called this the Pacific Ocean. Why? Because it was so calm. Like Pacific in Latin, in Spanish, in Portuguese means calm. Think of a baby. What do you give a screaming baby? You give them a pacifier to calm them down. And so that's what Magellan does. He ends up sailing then north along the western coast of South America, and then past Central America and out into, I take that back, that was Sir Francis Drake. Magellan goes due west once he gets out from the southern tip of South America. My apologies there. So Magellan is the purple guy here, okay? Magellan makes it to the Spice Islands, but something bad happens, okay? You see here, this what I just basically showed you. For 38 days, 3 remaining ships sailed across the strait through torturous cold and fog until finally they emerged to the waters. Let's find out what happens to our dear friend here, Ferdinand Magellan.
Month after month, the little fleet sailed across the immense ocean. Finally, after 99 grueling days without rest or fresh food, Magellan landed on the island now called Guam. After resting and replenishing at Guam, Magellan sailed to Cebu, now part of the Philippines, en route to the Moluccas. There, he befriended the island's chief and established the first Spanish alliance in the Pacific. Magellan agreed to fight alongside the Cebu chief against the chief of a neighboring island. But on April 27, 1521, Magellan was killed in the battle. The fleet navigator, Juan Sebastian Elcano, led the remaining crew to the Moluccas. He loaded the one remaining ship with spices and decided to sail back to Spain on the well-established westward route. Magellan had never intended to circle the globe, and yet, when the Victoria sailed into Spain on September 8, 1522, nearly 3 years after embarking, the expedition had completed the first circumnavigation of Earth and profoundly changed history. Magellan's expedition gave the first true record of the distribution of oceans and continents. He discovered the enormity of the Pacific Ocean, the vastness of the planet. And yet, by finding the strait that now bears his name, the one that links the Atlantic and the Pacific, east and west, the new and the old, he showed how connected the world could become.
Okay, so further than that, here's a $1 million word for you. Phenomenological language. That's right, phenomenological language. All right, what a further thing that he proved with his voyage when he circumnavigated the globe was he proved not that the world was round. Everybody knew the world was round, but he proved that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. He proved guys like Galileo and Copernicus right in their theory that the Earth was actually not the center of the solar system. And the way that he did that was, as the video said, on September 8th, they arrived here in Spain, right? But what's interesting about it is when they got to Spain, the crew said, yes, it's great, we're here, it's September 8th. But everybody in Spain said, no, it's not, it's September 7th. And the crew's like, what are you talking about? It's September 8th. And he said, no, it's not, it's September 7th. And the crew's like, look, there were 2 guys on board the ship. They each, independently of each other, kept journals of the entire trip. every day they wrote in it, we can prove that it's September 8th. And the people in Spain were like, well, yeah, but maybe you made a mistake because we've been living here in Spain the entire time. We haven't gone out on this crazy journey around the world. It's September 7th. And both of them were correct. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how is that possible? How is it possible that for some people it was September 7th? And that's true. But yet, for the crew of Magellan, it was September 8th. And the trick lies in this. As they were going around the world here, let me go back. When they crossed a certain point here in the Pacific Ocean, right about here, actually, more like here. That's called the international date line. You see, everything east of this line here where my mouse is going, everything over on this side of the world is a day behind everything to this side of the world. Remember, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west? Well, they had crossed the international date line, and when they did, they gained a day. And so for them, it was, in fact, September 8th. But for the people in Spain, it was September 7th. But so we take for granted Magellan's voyage, but it had significance, more significance than just getting to the Moluccas to get spices. It proved a lot of scientific theory correct and gave us a pretty accurate idea of the scope of the world, where the oceans were, where the continents were, and how all of that interconnected. And so Magellan ends up going down in history as one of the greatest explorers of all time, rather accidentally, but still his discoveries were of great importance.